0. Forget the glamour. Old Hollywood was secretly run by a rulebook so absurd, it feels like a fever dream. This was a world where bananas were a moral threat. The way you walked could be illegal, and toilets were forbidden technology. These weren't just guidelines, they were law, enforced by paranoid censors with the imagination of a terrified hamster. Today, we're exposing 33 of the most hilariously idiotic rules that stars were forced to obey. 1. Okay, let's get one thing straight. The people running old Hollywood weren't just censors, they were paranoid, joy-hating goblins in a windowless room, and their arch-nemesis was the banana. I am not making this up. The simple act of a woman eating a banana on screen was considered so outrageously suggestive, so dangerously phallic, that it was treated with the same gravity as a nuclear launch sequence. The fruit itself was basically put on a watch list. You can picture the emergency meeting. Gentlemen, we have a code yellow. Ingrid Bergman is peeling a banana in scene 42. I need security on standby and a priest on speed dial. This wasn't just a rule, it was a full-blown war on potassium, turning a simple snack into the forbidden fruit of Hollywood Babylon. Directors literally had to replace it with a less provocative fruit, like a sensible, boring apple. 2. You thought policing fruit was their masterpiece of paranoia? Oh, you sweet, naive soul. That was just the warm-up act. The censors' magnum opus of insanity was their official war on suggestive walking. Yes, walking. If an actress, particularly a bombshell like Marilyn Monroe, walked with what they considered too much hip oscillation, they would declare a state of moral emergency. Her iconic walk was analyzed by committees of grumpy old men with the intensity of the CIA examining satellite photos. They saw societal collapse in every sway of her hips. This led to demands for retakes where the actress had to walk like a malfunctioning robot. Imagine being a director and having to say, with a straight face, "Darling, the performance was magnificent, but the moral fabric of America just tore a little when you took that last step. Let's try it again, but this time, walk like you're smuggling a priceless Ming vase between your knees." 3. Grab a notepad and a stiff drink, because we're about to dive into the quantum mechanics of Hollywood stupidity. I present to you the lingerie loophole. A rule so baffling, so devoid of logic, it could only have been invented by someone who had suffered a recent head injury. Here's how it worked. If an actress's skirt accidentally rode up, revealing a scandalous inch of bare thigh, the scene was immediately banned. It was vulgar, an affront to decency. However, if that very same actress was intentionally parading around her bedroom in a full silk teddy for minutes, that was perfectly fine. In fact, it was glamorous. So let's review. An accidental flash of skin is a moral catastrophe, but intentionally strutting around in your underwear is high art. This wasn't a double standard. It was a standard that had been dropped on its head as a baby. 4. Hollywood's moral compass wasn't just broken, it was spinning like a drunk ballerina in a hurricane. According to the Hays Code, the portrayal of pain had its own deeply idiotic guidelines. Physical suffering from cartoonish slapstick violence? That was considered wholesome entertainment. An anvil falling on someone's head or getting hit with a pie was peak comedy. But showing a character suffering from a real illness? Absolutely not. A character having a coughing fit or looking pale from a fever was deemed distasteful. In this twisted reality, brutal physical comedy was fine, but a simple reminder that human beings sometimes get sick was a step too far. It's like they thought the audience could handle cartoon violence, but the sight of a tissue would send them into a full-blown panic. 5. And now, for a rule so legendary in its stupidity, it deserves its own national holiday. I'm talking about the infamous 1 foot on the floor rule. Whenever a man and a woman were in a romantic scene in a bedroom, even fully clothed and just discussing tax law, at least one of them had to keep 1 foot physically planted on the floor at all times. This turned any attempt at creating passion into a clumsy game of Twister, where actors were more focused on their podiatric responsibilities than their performance. Imagine trying to deliver a heartfelt monologue while your entire brain is screaming, "Don't lift the heel! For the love of God, keep the foot down." It's a miracle these scenes look romantic at all, instead of just looking like two people trying to discreetly stretch out a calf cramp. 6. In the golden age of cinema, a leading man's height wasn't just a physical trait, it was practically a matter of national security. And if a star was on the shorter side, the studio would go to absolutely comical lengths to preserve the illusion of his towering masculinity. Shoe lifts were for amateurs. For actor Alan Ladd, film crews would sometimes have to dig an actual trench in the ground for his taller female co-stars to stand in, just so he could look down on them heroically. This wasn't movie magic, this was full-blown, ego-driven civil engineering. Imagine the call sheet. We'll need a camera, 3 lights, a sound guy, and a shovel. The shovel is for Joan, she's too tall again. It's a testament to the fragility of the male ego in Hollywood. 7. Kisses in old Hollywood were a meticulously policed affair, micromanaged to the point of clinical insanity. The rules went far beyond the famous 3-second time limit. According to the censors, kisses could not be excessive or lustful, a vague directive they often interpreted in the most bizarre way imaginable. The kiss could not make any audible sound. No smacking, no smooching, nothing. This meant the most passionate embraces on screen had to be performed in eerie, dead silence. There was literally a job where a person would sit in a dark room and listen intently, ready to ban a scene if they heard even the slightest "moi." It's hard to imagine anything less romantic than 2 people pressing their faces together while trying to be as quiet as ninjas robbing a library filled with sleeping cats. 8. For decades, the entire American film industry operated under the collective agreement that human beings are magical creatures who do not possess digestive systems. The all-powerful Hays Code made it absolutely forbidden to show a toilet on screen. You could show gunfights, car crashes, and all sorts of mayhem, but the one thing you could not show was a simple piece of porcelain plumbing. It was so strictly enforced that when Alfred Hitchcock finally broke the taboo in his 1960 thriller Psycho by showing a toilet being flushed, it caused a national scandal. People were genuinely shocked. The simple, mundane act of flushing a toilet was treated like one of the most revolutionary and controversial moments in the history of cinema. It was the flush heard round the world. 9. In the bizarre orchestra of Hollywood censorship, some instruments were considered more dangerous than others. And the most evil of them all? The saxophone. Its smooth, sultry sound was considered so inherently sensual, so dangerously corrupting, that it was practically classified as a weapon of moral destruction. In film scores, the saxophone was often banned or, if used, it was a dead giveaway that you were meeting a character of questionable morals. It was the official soundtrack for Temptation. You can just imagine a committee of stern-faced censors listening to a jazz solo, clutching their pearls and shaking their heads, convinced that its seductive notes would single-handedly bring down society and lead to a nationwide epidemic of, well, whatever it is, saxophones make you do. 10. Just when you think the paranoia of the Hays Code couldn't get any more ridiculous, you discover their deep-seated suspicion of the animal kingdom. Censors would actually hire people to listen to animal sound effects in films to ensure they weren't too suggestive. A cow's moo could be rejected if it sounded too flirtatious. A pig's oink could be cut if it was deemed too provocative. You have to wonder what exactly a lustful moo sounds like. This raises so many questions. Was there a government-approved list of chaste animal noises? It's the absolute peak of absurdity. Grown men in suits, sitting in a dark room, debating whether a chicken's clucking was a little too come hither, and deciding that the rooster's crow was bordering on harassment. 11. While the censors were busy protecting the public from pregnant women and bananas, they were also offering their legal services to a very surprising client, Satan himself. According to the Hays Code, not only could the devil not be portrayed as a comical figure, but the very concept of defying the devil was often seen as problematic. In some scripts, characters who mocked or challenged Satan were seen as giving him too much credit or, worse, being flippant about the ultimate evil. This led to the glorious insanity where Lucifer, the Prince of Darkness, had better on-screen protection from being made fun of than most actors had in their contracts. While a studio could own your name and force you into fake marriages, they had to make damn sure nobody hurt the devil's feelings. The logic is just chef's kiss. 12. Welcome to the iconic symbol of old Hollywood's passionless universe, the mandatory twin beds. In any film, a married couple, no matter how deeply in love, was strictly forbidden from sharing the same bed. Their bedroom had to be furnished with two single beds, often separated by a nightstand that acted as a veritable Berlin Wall of chastity. The implication was that the sight of a single, shared mattress would be so overwhelmingly suggestive of actual intimacy that it would cause mass hysteria in the streets. It presented a bizarre vision of marriage where partners were basically just polite, pajama-clad roommates. It's a miracle anyone in these movies ever had children, unless they were conceived via a very polite, long-distance handshake from across the room. 13. In the fantasy world of old Hollywood, stars were not human. They were perfect, porcelain dolls who were immune to basic biology. And the most forbidden biological function of all? Sweating. Visible sweat was considered disgustingly unglamorous and was completely banned, especially on leading ladies. Makeup artists were on constant perspiration patrol, ready to leap into action with a powder puff if an actress showed even the slightest hint of a glow under the scorching studio lights. It didn't matter if you were filming a dance number in a hot room. You were expected to remain as cool and dry as a marble statue. This created the absurd illusion that these godlike beings simply glided through life without ever breaking a sweat, fueled by nothing but glamour and weak tea. 14. In the 1950s, a new crisis gripped Hollywood, a threat so primal and beastly it had to be eradicated: chest hair. After decades of rugged, hairy-chested heroes like Clark Gable, the fashion suddenly shifted to a smooth, civilized look. And the studios enforced this with the terrifying zeal of a cult. Actors who were naturally furry were subjected to the mandatory chest wig mandate, but in reverse. They were forced into painful waxing sessions or had their chest hair literally glued down with spirit gum to create a smooth surface. In some extreme cases, makeup artists would apply a flesh-colored latex patch over the offending hair, essentially giving the actor a rubber chest. It was a painful, humiliating process to conform to a bizarre new standard of manliness that decided hair was for apes, not for movie stars. 15. The censors' paranoia wasn't limited to the English language. Oh no, their mission to eradicate profanity was a global affair. They would actually hire translators to meticulously comb through scripts to ensure that characters speaking in other languages weren't secretly sneaking in curse words. A merde in French or a Scheisse in German was treated with the same level of alarm as its English equivalent. You can just imagine the scene. An actor delivers a passionate line in Italian, and a nervous censor stops the entire production to consult a translator, terrified that the character might have just insulted the Pope or said a naughty word about pasta. It was a level of micromanagement that was both impressive and profoundly stupid. 16. In old Hollywood, you weren't just an actor, you were a product. And a product needs a personality, even if it's completely fake. Studios would routinely assign bizarre, wholesome hobbies to their stars for PR purposes, regardless of their actual interests. A rugged, tough guy actor known for playing gangsters might be forced to pose for a series of magazine photos where he's awkwardly knitting a sweater for a poodle. A glamorous femme fatale would be photographed enthusiastically gardening, even if she'd never touched soil in her life. It was all about crafting a perfect, marketable image, which often resulted in hilarious and deeply unconvincing portrayals of people pretending to enjoy things they clearly hated, all while smiling through the pain. 17. In the great battle against human anatomy, the Hollywood censors had one mortal enemy, a tiny circle of skin that they believed was a direct portal to moral decay: the navel. The belly button was public enemy number one. It was so shockingly indecent, so utterly scandalous, that it was banned from the screen for decades. This forced costume designers into a state of constant, high-alert warfare against the human midriff. They had to engineer elaborate outfits, use strategically placed props, and invent new laws of fashion physics, all to ensure that not a single belly button would ever see the light of day. You have to wonder what they thought would happen if one appeared. Would the audience faint? Would society crumble? We'll never know because they guarded it like a state secret. 18. If you wanted to be a starlet in old Hollywood, it wasn't enough to be beautiful or talented. You had to be sent to charm school, which was less of a school and more of a boot camp for reprogramming human behavior. This is where studios sent their actresses to be stripped of all their natural, quirky habits and rebuilt into perfect, ladylike robots. The lessons were absurd. You'd be taught how to sneeze gracefully, how to laugh without showing too many teeth, and, most famously, how to walk with a stack of books on your head to achieve perfect posture. It was a bizarre, torturous process designed to create an army of identical, flawless women who never did anything as undignified as tripping or having a genuine loud laugh. 19. If you think your office politics are bad, you've never seen the sheer terror of lunchtime at a studio commissary. The seating arrangement wasn't just a place to eat. It was a brutal, public map of the Hollywood caste system. It was a high school cafeteria on steroids, where your entire career could be defined by where you put your tray. There was the A-list table, gleaming with power. There was the table for rising stars, buzzing with nervous energy. And then there was the corner of shame, reserved for has-beens and actors who just had a movie flop. Sitting at the wrong table wasn't just a social blunder. It was a career death sentence, a public declaration that your star was fading. 20. The Hays Code had a very specific rule for religious figures like priests and ministers. They had to be perfect. Not just good, but completely, inhumanly perfect. They could never be portrayed as villains, which makes sense, I guess. But they also couldn't be portrayed as figures of comedy. They couldn't tell a joke, be clumsy, or have any discernible personality flaw. They had to be stoic, infallible, walking saints who were about as interesting as a bowl of unsalted oatmeal. This rule essentially guaranteed that the most boring, one-dimensional character in any movie would be the guy wearing a clerical collar. He was just there to be pious and offer wisdom, stripped of all the humanity that makes a character compelling. 21. The magic of black and white film required some truly bizarre behind-the-scenes tricks, especially when it came to makeup. To make leading men look normal and rugged on screen, they had to be painted in a palette of colors that made them look like fashionable aliens off-camera. This often included a thick, heavy foundation that was basically yellow, with dark brown or even green contouring. But the best part was the lipstick. To make their lips show up correctly on film, macho icons like Clark Gable and Humphrey Bogart often had to wear shades of dark blue or bright green lipstick. Nothing says, "I'm the toughest guy in this room," quite like sitting in a makeup chair getting your lips painted the color of a lime. 22. In old Hollywood, your love life wasn't your own. It was a marketing asset owned and operated by the studio. Romances were often completely fabricated for PR, and the process was about as romantic as a corporate merger. The studio would call you into an office and say, "Congratulations, this week you're madly in love with Rock Hudson. We have 3 dinner dates and a movie premiere scheduled. Please look happy." You would then have to go on these excruciatingly awkward, staged dates, smiling for the photographers and pretending to be smitten with someone you may have just met or actively disliked. It was a world where dating wasn't about finding love. It was about selling movie tickets. 23. Hollywood has always been obsessed with youth, but in the golden age, they took it to a whole new, legally binding level. Studios would routinely lie about the ages of their actresses, shaving off 5, 10, or sometimes even more years to make them seem younger and more marketable. But this wasn't just a casual fib. It was written into their contracts. The actress was then forced to maintain this lie for her entire career. Imagine having to remember your fake birthday for decades, constantly doing mental math to keep your backstory straight. It was a system that demanded women not only be perfect and talented, but also be willing to participate in a weird, long-term identity fraud scheme. 24. We've already established that married couples had to sleep in twin beds. But the insanity of the Hollywood bedroom didn't stop there. There was another unspoken but ruthlessly enforced rule. Beds could never look rumpled. Even if a character had supposedly just woken up from a deep 8-hour slumber, their bed had to be perfectly neat, with crisp sheets and flawlessly fluffed pillows. It had to look like it was prepared for a military inspection. A messy bed might suggest that something, happened in it. This created the bizarre visual of people who apparently didn't sleep so much as levitate horizontally above their covers to avoid creating a single wrinkle. 25. In the bizarre economy of old Hollywood, actors weren't treated as artists. They were treated as valuable, tradable assets, like a rare baseball card. This was formalized in the loan-out system. If one studio needed a particular star who was under contract with a rival, they wouldn't ask nicely. They'd trade. You could be loaned out to another studio against your will, often as punishment for misbehaving or as part of a package deal for a different actor. Imagine being told by your boss, "Good morning, we're trading you to Warner Brothers for 3 months in exchange for 2 character actors and a slightly used film camera. Pack your bags." It was a system that reduced human beings to mere commodities on a ledger. 26. What's in a name? In old Hollywood, absolutely nothing because it wasn't yours. The studio owned it. Aspiring actors were routinely forced to change their names because their real ones were deemed too ethnic, too boring, or just not star-worthy. And this wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. A guy named Archibald Leach was dragged through the studio's star name generator and came out the other side as Cary Grant. The shy, awkward Isser Danielovich was reborn as the hyper-masculine Kirk Douglas. You had zero say in the matter. The studio could have decided your new name was Sparklehoof McGillicuddy, and you'd have to smile and say thank you. 27. While the Hays Code was busy banning curse words on screen, the off-screen language on some movie sets was a different story. But some directors and producers tried to curb it in the most childish way imaginable, a literal swear jar. Stars like Spencer Tracy and Clark Gable, men who were the absolute epitome of on-screen masculinity, were reportedly fined 25 cents for every curse word they uttered during production. You can just picture these Hollywood legends, famous for their tough guy personas, being scolded like schoolboys and forced to dig in their pockets for a quarter because they let a damn slip out while fumbling a line. It's a hilarious image of playground rules being applied to the biggest stars in the world. 28. The Hays Code had a simple, boring, and unbreakable rule for all movie criminals. Crime does not pay. This meant that every single villain, gangster, or thief in every single movie had to be punished by the end. No exceptions. They had to either be arrested, die in a dramatic fashion, or live a life of miserable regret. This completely removed any suspense or moral ambiguity from the story. From the moment the bad guy appeared on screen, you knew he was doomed. It basically turned every crime movie into a 2-hour public service announcement, telling the audience, "See? This is why you should always follow the rules because the bad guy is a complete idiot who is about to get what's coming to him." 29. The obsession with morality in old Hollywood was so extreme that it even extended to the 4-legged cast members. Famous animal actors like Asta the dog from the Thin Man movie series had actual studio contracts, and these contracts included morality clauses. I'm not joking. An animal could be fired for unbecoming conduct. What in the world does that even mean for a dog? Was he caught fraternizing with a stray cat? Did he bark at a studio executive in a disrespectful tone? It remains one of Hollywood's greatest and dumbest mysteries. It's a level of control so absolute that even the pets weren't safe from the long, puritanical arm of the studio. 30. In the cinematic universe governed by the Hays Code, authority figures were infallible gods walking among mortals. It was strictly forbidden to portray police officers, government officials, or judges as villains, or even as incompetent fools. They always had to be right, heroic, and just. This rule essentially turned countless movies into cheesy propaganda films, where the authorities were always noble and the system always worked perfectly. It created a weirdly dishonest reality, where no cop ever made a mistake and no judge ever had a bad day. It was less about storytelling and more about reassuring the public that the people in charge were perfect, which, as we all know, is definitely true. 31. Here is a rule so fundamentally stupid it explains why heroes in old movies often seem so frustratingly passive. It was the no getting even rule. The Hays Code strictly forbade any depiction of revenge. Why? Because seeking vengeance meant an individual was taking justice into their own hands, which undermined the code's fantasy that all authority figures, especially the police, were perfect and all-knowing. So, if a villain murdered your entire family, you weren't allowed to go on a righteous rampage. Your only acceptable course of action was to patiently file a police report and then wait. This rule turned potential badasses into glorified hall monitors, effectively banning one of the most powerful storytelling motivations in human history and replacing it with the thrilling drama of waiting for the proper authorities to handle it. 32. Here's a bizarre, unwritten rule that you'll notice in almost every old Hollywood film. Characters are constantly surrounded by alcohol, but they rarely seem to actually drink it. Liquor was treated more like a prop than a beverage. A fancy party scene would be filled with people holding elegant cocktail glasses to signify that the environment was sophisticated or risque. But showing a character, especially a leading lady, getting genuinely drunk was a major taboo. It was okay to hold a glass of whiskey, but not to show the effects of it. Alcohol was for looking glamorous and holding in your hand, not for consumption. It was the ultimate cinematic accessory. 33. The final, unspoken rule of old Hollywood was to maintain the illusion of godhood at all costs. This meant that A-list stars were strongly discouraged, and sometimes outright forbidden, from mingling with the below-the-line film crew, the cameramen, the electricians, the grips. This was done to preserve their aura of mystique, and ensure that no one discovered that these divine screen idols were actual human beings. The studio didn't want the common folk to find out that the glamorous movie queen also eats tuna sandwiches, tells bad jokes, or gets food stuck in her teeth. The separation was crucial to keeping the stars on a pedestal, far away from the mere mortals who made their movies possible. 901. So there you have it. A world governed by silent kisses, terrified censors, and trenches dug for short kings. It was pure madness. But here's the real question. Which system is truly worse? The explicit, absurd rules of the Hays Code that controlled every move, or today's unwritten laws of cancel culture where one mistake can end a career overnight? I want a full-blown war in the comments. And if you enjoy this brand of historical insanity, hit like and subscribe for more.